Level 1, the recruit. You step into the freezing courtyard of the training facility, your breath turning into thick white mist in the unforgiving winter air. The heavy iron gate slams shut behind you with a deafening metal clank that resonates through your very bones. You are no longer an individual with a past, a name, or a set of personal dreams. You have become a microscopic cop in the grand, terrifying machinery of the Committee for State Security. The instructors do not look at you with the eyes of mentors, but rather with the cold, calculating gaze of butchers assisting a piece of meat. They strip away your civilian cloths, replacing them with a stiff, scratchy uniform that smells faintly of damp wool and industrial soup. Your first lesson is not in combat or espionage, but in the total and absolute suppression of your own conscience. You sit in a poorly lit classroom where the walls are painted sickly, institutional green. A flickering fluorescent bulb buzzes incessantly overhead, a constant irritation that grates agents your sanity. You are handed a thick manual detailing the countless ways a citizen might betray the state. You must learn to see treason in a misplaced glance, a whispered conversation, or a simple failure to plot eno. Trust is the first casualty of your new existence. The man sitting next to you, who shared his rations with you yesterday, is now a potential informant reporting on your ideology reported. You learn to monitor your own slip, to fight that a wayward dream might case you to murmur something subversive in the dark. Sleep deprivation becomes a constant companion, leaving your mind in a perpetual, agonizing fog. You are ordered to write a detailed report analyzing the suspected anti-Soviet sentiments of your own family members. Your hand trembles as the pen scratches across the rolled paper, sealing the fate of those you once loved. The ink looks like dribble in the dim light of your solitary desk. You hand the report to the commanding officer, feeling a piece of your soul detect and wire way forward. He barely glances at it, tossing it onto a mountain of similar betrayals. This is the initiation ritual, the mandatory blood sacrifice required to prove your unwavering loyalty to the apparatus. You return to your cramped barracks, staring blankly at the cracked ceiling until the morning sun tricks. Level 2, the junior lieutenant. You have survived the ideological brutalization and are now deployed onto the gray, slush-filled streets of the capital. Your primary weapon is not a pistol, but an honest scribble of the briefcase and an unremarkable, forgettable face. You are assigned to monitor a block of brutalist apartment buildings where the working class huddles in quiet separation. Your days are spent sitting in freezing, unheated vans, listening to the crackling audio feeds from hidden microphones. You hear the mundane arguments of exhausted husbands and wives, sifting through their misery for a single shred of political dissent. Every call, every sigh, and every hushed whisper is meticulously logged in your endless, suffocating paperwork. The sheer volume of banality threatens to drown out any remaining spark of your humanity. You become a phantom, lingering in the stairwells where the paint is peeling off the walls like dead skin. Your primary objective now shifts to recruiting affamous informants from the very people you have relentlessly surveilling. You seek out the weak, the desperate, and the uniquely greedy, offering them pitiful scraps of privates in exchange for their never steepest crits. A frightened factory worker finally breaks, agreeing to report on his foreman while his ass darts wildly in the dim light of a dirty alleyway. You feel a momentary, hollow surge of power, which is immediately replaced by a nauseating wave of absolute self-desist. The pervasive paranoia you instill in ours eventually begins to infect your own mind, acting like a creeping wrath to slowly diverse irrational thoughts. You begin to check your own apartment for listening devices, tearing the wallpaper off in a frantic, sweaty search for non-existent bugs. Every mundane shadow in your room seems to stretch and distort into the terrifying silhouette of a terrified officer watching your every move. Level 3, the interrogator. Because of your terrifying efficiency, you are promoted from the freezing streets to the suffocating depths of the Lubinka basement. The still air down here is thick and heavy with the metallic, unforgettable stench of fear, sweat, and long dry blood. Your new office is a windowless, concrete cop furnished with absolutely nothing but a heavy metal desk and two terribly hard wooden chairs. The bright, blinding spotlight aimed directly at the suspect's chair provides the only harsh illumination in this miserable room. You quickly learn that physical violence is a crude tool, and quite frankly, entirely unnecessary for breaking a human bank. True psychological destruction is an elevated art form, requiring the careful, surgical dismantling of the prisoner's spirit over time. You sit across from a shivering, malnourished intellectual who has been accustomed to assessing banned, subversive literature. You never raise your voice. Instead, you speak in a soft, monotonous whisper that intentionally chills him straight to the bone. You pleasant entirely fabricated evidence to the man, weaving a web of lies so incredibly and triply intricate even he begins to doubt his own innocence. Days completely blur, too nice as the interrogation drags on, forming an endless, agonizing cycle of questions, exhausted duels, and mounting despair. You sit back and simply watch his sanity unravel, piece by piece, until he finally breaks and confesses to bizarre crimes he could not possibly have committed. The false confession is signed with a violently trembling hand, representing a meaningless, hollow victory in the state's endless war against the truth. You wash your hands in the rusted, dirty sink of the officer's washroom, yet you feel that the metaphorical blood will never truly wash off your skin. The hollow, defeated, and dead eyes of the condemned man uniquely haunt your incredibly rare, fleeting moments of actual sleep. To cope with this reality, you routinely dream cheap, burning vodka until your stomach physically itches and your traumatic memories blur into a numb, gray haze. Level 4. The case officer. Your demonstrated proficiency in crushing human souls has unfortunately earned you a highly coveted transfer to the Foreign Intelligence Director. You are immediately sent to a divided, tense Berlin, a terrifying city of shadows where the Cold War is broadly bought in whisper conversations and hidden dead drops. Your scratchy uniform is heavily replaced by tailored Western suits, but the gray, oppressive, and miserable white on your soul remains tragically identical. You quietly walk through the bright, neon-lit streets of the West, observing the decadent capitalism you have been ruthlessly trained to detest, yet you secretly, guiltily envy it. You cultivate relationships with diplomats, businessmen, and long secretaries, always searching for a hidden vulnerability to ruthlessly exploit. Your entire existence in this foreign land is a carefully constructed lie built upon a fragile foundation of cynical manipulation. You drink expensive scotch with a brightish attitude, smiling warmly while mentally calculating the precise cost of buying his treason. Every handshake is a calculated assessment, and every shed low is a hollow echo of a genuine human connection. You learn that terrifying threat of total ruin is often a far more effective currency than a simple suitcase full of unmarked banknotes. Blackmail becomes your fluent second language, spoken softly in quiet restaurants and on secluded, freezing park benches across the divided city. You return to your sterile safes each night, obsessively checking the intricate arrangements of desk and hair to ensure no one has entered in your absence. The crushing loneliness of living a perpetual double life slowly beckons to fracture the furniture of your sanity. You trust absolutely no one, not your informants, not your Western contacts, and especially not the watchful, unlinking eyes of your own embassy. Level 5. The Station Chief. Your ruthless efficiency in turning foreign assets has elevated you to the coveted position of running the entire intelligence residence. You no longer walk the rainy streets. Instead, you sit in a fortified room behind iron doors, orchestrating a complex bullet of espionage from afar. Your desk is a chaotic battlefield of encrypted cables, detailing the tragic lives of hundreds of agents dancing blindly on the edge of the abyss. You hold the terrifying power of life and death over your subordinates, knowing that a single mistake will cost them absolutely everything. The relentless pressure to deliver constant intelligence to the center in Moscow is a physical weight pressing painfully down on your chest. You demand impossible results from your desperate case officers, pushing them into increasingly generous and reckless foreign operations. When operation inevitably fails and agent is captured, you feel absolutely nothing but a cold, calculating annoyance at the logistical setback. You meticulously draft the encrypted cables that will send men to their executions, signing your name with a steady, unfeeling hand. Empathy has been completely eradicated from your psychological makeup, replaced entirely by a terrifying, machine-like pragmatism. Yet, the higher you climb within the bureaucratic apparatus, the more precarious and delicate your own position becomes. You know intimately that the men in Moscow are always watching, waiting for a momentary lapse in judgment or a subtle hint of ideological failure. Level 6, the Counterintelligence Director. You are promptly recalled to the frozen motherland, not to be celebrated, but to mercilessly hunt the traitors hiding within your own sprawling organization. The successful hunter officially becomes the hunted, as you are tasked with uncovering deep cover moles embedded within the committee itself. You navigate the labyrinthine corridors of the Lubyanka headquarters with a perpetual, sickening knot of dread tightly caught in your stomach. Your former friends and trust colleagues are now your primary suspects. Their every casual word analyzed for the faintest trace of foreign influence. You authorize illegal white-apps on the private phones of decorated generals, listening to their intimate, weeping conversations with a chilling detachment. The institutional paranoia reaches a terrifying fever pitch as you realize that the enemy is not across the ocean, but sitting right across the briefing table. You discover that a diplomat trusted deputy has been selling secrets to the Americans for years. His betrayal a stinging slap to the face of the entire directorate. You personally oversee his brutal interrogation, watching a man you once respected reduced to a sobbing Pathika on the freezing concrete floor. He begs for mercy that you are physically incapable of giving, his pathetic cries echoing off the damp, blood-stained walls of the execution cellar. You sign the execution order with a stroke of your pen, feeling absolutely nothing as in their human life is permanently erased from the history gore. This profound omiss terrifies you more than any physical pain, a stark realization that the system has finally, completely devoured your soul. Level 7, the Directorate Head. Your reward for this unblinking ruthlessness is a sprawling wood panel office on the heavily guarded floors of the Lubyanka building. You now command a vast army of unseen phantoms, dictating the grim fate of thousands with the casual indifference of a god. The fire high on your massive disk present the meticulously documented destruction of countless dissidents, intellectuals, and ordinary, terrified citizens. You sit in endless, suffocating meetings with our high-ranking upper chicks, where every spoken word is a carefully calculated move in a deadly political match. A single misplaced syllable or a slight hesitation in praising the chairman's latest decree can result in your immediate, fatal downfall. You have assisted the most horrific, deeply bright secrets of the state, an agonizing burden of knowledge that constantly threatens to crush your sanity. You read reports of enduring famines, mass deportations, and secret psychological experiments that defy the very concept of human morality. To survive in this rarefied air, you must become the master of double think, simultaneously knowing the horrifying truth and vehemently denying its very existence. You smile warmly at state banquets, raising a crystal glass of champagne while secretly plotting the quiet disappearance of the man standing beside you. Level 8, the General. You are ordered a heavy, gold-embroidered uniform and a chest full of meaningless medals that painfully weigh down your stooped, exhausted shoulders. The state provides you with a luxurious, heavily guarded dacha in the sprawling, snowy forest outside of the capital city. You eat imported black caviar and drink the finest French cognac, surrounded by a suffocating silence that is only broken by the howling winter wind. Despite the unimaginable luxury, your private estate is nothing more than a gilded, bountiful cage built upon a foundation of endless corpses. Your own personal security detail is actually a team of highly trained assassins, ordered to terminate you the moment your loyalty is even slightly questioned. You cannot trust your servants, your heavily vetted driver, or even the beautiful, terrifyingly silent woman the state has assigned to be your wife. The immense power you wield over the general populace is a pathetic illusion, easily shattered by a single, whispered command from the General Secretary. You are trapped in a terrifying paradox. Being the most fair man in the entire republic while simultaneously being the most terrified. Your nights are spent pacing the long, open hallways of your dacha, jumping at the slight creak of the floorboards and the shadows cast by the moon. You suffer from horrific, vivid nightmares where the millions of nameless victims you helped dry rise from the frozen earth to drag you down into the dark. You wake up screaming in the dead of night, clutching your chest as your heart hammers against her ribs like a trapped, Diamonal. Level 9. The Inner Circle. You have somehow survived the brutal purrs and the treacherous infighting, ascending to the absolute pinnacle of the Soviet intelligence apparatus. You are now one of the chosen few who whisper directly into the ear of the aging, paranoid premier who controls the destiny of half the globe. Your daily briefing shaped the geopolitical reality of the entire world, capable of starting catastrophic wars or toppling foreign governments with a single, whispered session. You walk through the echoing, cavernous halls of the Kremlin, your footsteps muffled by thick red carpets that look remarkably flowing rivers of blood. Yet, the terrifying proximity to absolute power only magnifies the crushing, suffocating paranoia that has defined your entire miserable existence since the day you first walked through the house iron gates. You realize with a sickening clarity that Premier is a cynical, highly unpredictable monster who views even his most loyal, blood-soaked advisors as completely disposable, meaningless pawns. The face of your fellow committee members are frozen masks of polite difference, hiding a venomous ambition that constantly plots your violent, agonizing demise in the shadows. Every Levestate Zinner is a psychological battlefield where a single misplaced drop of sweat or subtly trembling can trigger an immediate, fatal denunciation. You meticulously orchestrate the quiet, sudden disappearances of your political rivals, knowing perfectly well that they are simultaneously arranging the exact same horrific for you. The immense, terrifying mission of state security that you dedicate your entire life to building has finally become a ravenous, uncontrollable beast that perpetually demands constant human sacrifices. You stare dully into the ornate, zilded mirrors of the Kremlin and see absolutely nothing but a hollowed-out, aging ghost trapped permanently inside a prison of his own medicalist design. The countless atrocities you have committed, authorized, and silently witnessed to suddenly coalesce into a crushing, unbearable psychological weight that threatens to completely shatter your fragile mind. You secretly begin to draft your own highly classified Mars in the dead of night, a desperate, entirely foolish attempt to justify a lifetime of unforgivable, unspeakable sins to an empty universe. But you burn every single page before the grey dawn breaks, terrified that even your own private wit thoughts will inevitably be used as damning evidence of your inherent treason. You are absolutely and utterly alone at the undisputed apes of human power, isolated by an impenetrable fortress of lies, profane terror, and the deafening silence of 100 million terrified citizens. A subtle, terrifying shift in the political wind occurs when the aging premier suddenly zizzes in his sleep, instantly plunging the entire Central Committee into a chaotic, bloodthirsty struggle for ultimate survival. You realize with the cold, absolute, and paralyzing certainty that your incredibly long, bloody reign of bureaucratic terror has finally, irreversibly come to its catastrophic end. The heavily armed guards stationed immediately outside your lavish office door suddenly refuse to meet your ace, providing a silent, damning confirmation of your impending, inescapable zoom. Level 10. To cycle, the inevitable Aurus comes not in the dead of night, but in the glaring, humiliating light of day, executed by the very man you personally trained to be utterly devoid of human mercy or hesitation. You are forcefully stripped of your heavy, gold-embroidered uniform and unceremoniously thrown into the identical, freezing, windowless Lubian cabazim cell where you unsystematically broke the minds of countless innocent men. The brutal, pathetic irony of your pathetic situation is a sickening, highly acidic pill that you are violently forced to swallow as the heavy iron door slams shut with that agonizingly familiar, deafening metallic clang. The interrogator who sits across the heavy metal desk from you is young, ruthlessly ambitious, and terrifyingly cold reflection of your very own former self from many decades past. He speaks to you in the exact same soft, chillingly monotonous whisper you once perfected, presenting a staggering mountain of entirely fabricated evidence detailing your lifelong, treasonous conspiracy against the glorious state. You know perfectly well that dying these absurd, incredibly gross cages is absolutely foul, for the monstrous mission requires a spectacular, public confession to legitimize the bloody transition of my power. The severe psychological torture is meticulously administered with a precise, surgical cruelty you self-explicitly document in the highly classified training manuals being used to systematically meddle your remaining sanity. Days and nights completely blur into an agonizing, endless, inequitable nightmare of glaring spotlights, cyclical, maddening questions, and the complete systematic obliteration of your deeply fractured, miserable identity. You are ultimately, inevitably reduced to a shivering, pathetic, and fundamentally broken husk on the freezing concrete floor, violently sobbing as you eagerly, desperately signed a false confession that permanently guarantees your own immediate execution. The state apparatus meticulously and thoroughly erases your existence from the historical record, flawlessly airbrushing your face out of official photographs and heavily redacting your name from every single bureaucratic archive in the country. You are unceremoniously marched down the long, damp, horribly familiar blood-stained hallway toward the execution cellar, accompanied only by the deafening, rhythmic sound of your own panicked, incredibly shallow breathing. The silent executioner forcibly kicks you to your knees in the exact center of the dark, reeking room, the impossibly cold steel barrel of the pistol pressing intimately and firmly against the base of your vulnerably trembling skull. In your final, flitting, and terrifyingly lucid moment of consciousness, you realize with absolute clarity that you were never the master of this horrifying machine, but merely temporary, highly combustible fume only to be ruthlessly burned. The incredibly deafening gunshot echoes brightly and violently against the wet concrete walls before slowly fading into the eternal, utterly oppressive silence of the subterranean prison complex. The cold, profoundly indifferent bureaucracy immediately begins processing the extensive paperwork required to permanently dispose of your feasible animalist, frozen mass grave hidden deep within the desolate taiga. Your lifeless corpse is violently dragged through the subterranean corridors by men whose faces are entirely obscured by the suffocating dirt scuff of the underground complex. A lowly worker mechanically mops up the pooling crimson bolt that permanently stains the exact spot where your entire life work instantly extinguished. Your bountifully terrifying, silent wife immediately evicted from the sprawling doctor and quietly resynced to a remote, freezing communal apartment in the forgotten industrial sector. All of your luxurious possessions are rapidly inventoried and thoroughly British tributed to the very man who meticulously plotted your avenging downfall. The massive, towering piles of classified paperwork that once defined your immense political power are unceremoniously dumped into intentionally papers the bin of the capital city. Even the haunting, vivid nightmares that plague your fleeting moments of sleep are permanently erased, leaving absolutely no trace of your psychological torment in the physical realm. The incredibly ruthless young interrogator who flawlessly orchestrated your final confession is ceremoniously ordered a signing medal of absolute loyalty by the newly appointed premier. He proudly pins the heavy, gold-embroidered medal to his chest, utterly oblivious to the tragic fact that he has merely secured his own fair place in the execution cellar. He confidently sits down behind your former wood-paneled desk, staring out the reinforced glass windows at the sprawling metropolis he now believes he completely controls. The invisible, terrifying machine of state security does not pose to mourn your sudden disappearance, for its rusted gears must eternally continue to relentlessly turn. Far away from the opulent halls of the Kremlin, the Bertha wine halls relentlessly through the desolate courtyard of the provincial training facility. A brand new transport truck heavily rumbles through the towering iron gates, carrying a fresh batch of terrified recruits who have absolutely no idea what horrific destiny awaits them. A young man, possessing a name, a past and a set of entirely meaningless personal dreams, nervously stepped down into the freezing, slush-filled mud. He looks up at the massive brutalist concrete wall with a deep, sickening sense of existential dread slowly coiling in the pit of his churning stomach. The heavy iron gate slammed violently shut behind him, sealing his tragic fate with a deafening metallic clank that resonates through his very frail bonds. He is ordered to violently strip off his civilian clothes, leaving his individual identity in the pathetic, freezing pile on the snowy ground. He is aggressively handed a stiff, scratchy uniform that smells faintly of damp wool, industrial soup, and the lingering despair of a million forgotten souls. You are no longer present to witness this tragic repetition of history. Yet your unseen gust permeates every single frozen brick of the towering institution. The system perfectly and flawlessly replicates itself through this endless, brutal cycle of indoctrination, psychological destruction, and inevitable betrayal. It requires a constant, unique stream of human fuel to maintain the grand, terrifying illusion of absolute ideological supremacy. The young recruit will inevitably sit at the tiny wooden desk beneath the harshly buzzing fluorescent light tube, desperately learning to see treacherous treason in the eyes of his close friends. He will eventually write damning, soul-crushing reports that condemn innocent family members to freezing, and degrades in the desolate Siberian taiga. He will slowly climb the incredibly treacherous ladder of the bureaucratic apparatus, entirely trading his fundamental humanity for a fleeting illusion of political safety. He will relentlessly hunt hidden traitors in the dark corners of the capital, becoming a terrifying phantom who strictly trusts absolutely no one. He will ultimately sit in the massive office, wielding the power of a dark god while simultaneously trembling in sheer terror at the creaking of his own floorboards. And just like you, he will eventually be violently dragged down into the pitch-black cellar when his temporary usefulness to the monolithic state his immortal state has inevitably expired. The terrifyingly perfect architecture of the committee guarantees that there are absolutely no permanent victors, only highly temporary postponement of a violent death. Your pathetic, meaningless life was merely one microscopic revolution of a gigantic, crushing wheel that ground so into fine, gray dust to cold, relentless state apparatus stands eternally triumphant, securely upon a hidden mountain of shattered minds and violently erased hearts his stores. This is the tragic, unescapable reality of the perfect totalitarian machine, spinning endlessly in the dark void long after your forgotten bones for permanently turned to ash.